In the echo chambers of modern geopolitics, two names reverberate as a harbinger of imminent conflict: Israel and Iran. Their leaders trade veiled threats that become global headlines, their intelligence agencies wage a shadow war in distant lands, and their military programs are watched with a fear that borders on existential panic. The narrative presented to us is one of ancient enmity, a division rooted in the mists of time, a seemingly inevitable clash of civilizations. The one that dominates our present, is built upon the amnesia of a deep and radically different past. It is a story that ignores a time when these two peoples were not just coexistent, but foundational allies, bound together by an act of liberation so profound it shaped the destiny of one of them forever. In the heart of the British Museum rests a small clay cylinder, covered in Akkadian cuneiform script. It doesn't look like much, but it is the testament to a promise made over 2.5 millennia ago, a pact between a Persian king and the exiled Jewish people. This is the story of how that pact, that promise of friendship and mutual respect, was forged in antiquity, renewed in the modern age, and then shattered, dividing not just two nations, but creating fault lines that now stretch across the entire world. If this deep dive into the forgotten history that shapes our present seems fascinating to you, please consider taking a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue unearthing these crucial narratives that are so often lost in the noise of current events. To understand the magnitude of the friendship that was lost, we must first transport ourselves to the desperation of the 6th century before the Common Era. The kingdom of Judah had been crushed. In 586 BCE, the mighty Neo-Babylonian Empire, under King Nebuchadnezzar II, had descended upon Jerusalem with relentless fury. The city was sacked, its walls torn down, and, most devastatingly of all, Solomon's Temple, the epicenter of Jewish spiritual and national life, was reduced to rubble and ash. For a people whose identity was intrinsically tied to their land and their temple, but this was a cataclysm of unimaginable proportions. The elite of Judean society, the scribes, the priests, the artisans, and the leaders, were uprooted from their homeland in a forced march into exile. They found themselves captives in a strange land, Babylon, the heart of their conqueror's empire. The Psalms from this era drip with the sorrow of this displacement. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. This was not a simple military captivity. It was an existential crisis. Could Judaism survive without its temple? Could the Jewish people maintain their cultural and religious identity while scattered and subjugated? For nearly half a century, these questions hung heavy in the air, freighted with the hopelessness of a dispossessed nation. Then, from the east, a new power arose, an empire expanding with a speed and a philosophy of rule never before seen. This was the Achaemenid Persian Empire, and its architect was a man whose name would echo through history as a synonym for liberation: Cyrus the Great. Unlike the Assyrian and Babylonian conquerors before him, whose policy was to use mass deportation and cultural suppression to break the will of conquered peoples, Cyrus operated on a radically different principle. He believed that the stability of the empire was achieved not through brutality, but through tolerance and respect for the local customs and religions of his subjects. To him, a people allowed to worship their own gods and live by their own laws was a people less likely to revolt. It was a pragmatic, but also a profoundly humane form of statecraft. In the year 539 BCE, Cyrus's armies arrived at the gates of the fabled city of Babylon. The city, thought to be impregnable, fell with almost no bloodshed. For the captive peoples within its walls, this event was not a changing of masters, but the dawn of a new era. Shortly after his conquest, Cyrus issued an edict that would change the course of Jewish history. This decree, recorded in both the Cyrus Cylinder and the biblical books of Ezra and Nehemiah, was staggering in its generosity. It not only permitted the exiled Jews to return to their homeland, Judah, which the Persians referred to as the province of Yehud Medinata, but it explicitly authorized them to rebuild their temple in Jerusalem. This was unheard of. But Cyrus went further. The edict mandated that the sacred treasures Nebuchadnezzar had plundered from the first temple were to be returned, and that the rebuilding was to be funded by the Persian royal treasury. In essence, the Persian state was sponsoring the restoration of Jewish national and religious life. This act was not a mere historical footnote. It was the event that ended the Babylonian exile and enabled the birth of Second Temple Judaism, the matrix from which both modern rabbinic Judaism and Christianity would emerge. To the Jewish people, Cyrus was not just a benevolent foreign king. He was seen as an agent of the divine will. The prophet Isaiah refers to him explicitly as God's anointed one, a Hebrew term, Meshiach, or Messiah, normally reserved for the kings of Israel. This was the original promise, an act of salvation from a Persian king that etched a deep gratitude and sense of kinship into the Jewish consciousness. For the next 200 years, Judea flourished under Persian rule. They enjoyed significant autonomy, governed by a Persian-appointed Jewish governor and guided by their own high priest. It was during this period of relative peace and stability, under the protection of the empire, that much of the Hebrew Bible was compiled, edited, and canonized into the form we know today. Monumental figures like Ezra the scribe and Nehemiah the governor operated with Persian authority and resources to reconstruct not only the physical walls of Jerusalem, but the social and religious fabric of the nation. This era of cooperation set a precedent that would last for millennia. Even after Cyrus's empire fell to Alexander the Great, and after the land passed through the hands of the Ptolemies, Seleucids, and Romans, Jewish communities continued to thrive in Persia itself. They became one of the oldest, most vibrant, and intellectually productive Jewish diasporas in the world, creating monumental works like the Babylonian Talmud in academies located in modern-day Iraq and Iran. This long history of often peaceful and mutually enriching coexistence is the deep backdrop against which the current hostility must be judged. The centuries rolled on like desert sands, and empires rose and fell. The Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and then the expansion of Islam redrew the political and religious map of the Middle East. Persia itself underwent a profound transformation. In the 16th century, the Safavid dynasty consolidated power and established Twelver Shia Islam as the state religion. This event was crucial in forging modern Iranian identity, distinct from the predominantly Sunni Arab world that surrounded it. For the Jewish communities living in Persia, this marked a change. Under Islamic law, they were designated as dhimmi, a protected but second-class status. They paid a special tax and faced certain restrictions, but they were allowed to practice their faith and manage their own communal affairs. Life was not always easy. There were periods of persecution and forced conversions, but the Jewish community persevered, maintaining its unique heritage while absorbing elements of Persian culture. This complex relationship of tolerance and discrimination continued for centuries, a tapestry of coexistence that was a world away from the ideological enmity that would define the future. The 20th century brought with it the collapse of old empires and the birth of new nations. The rise of Zionism, the movement for the re-establishment of a Jewish homeland, culminated in 1948 with the Declaration of Independence for the State of Israel. The Arab world reacted with unified hostility, launching a war to destroy the nascent state in its cradle. In this climate of intense antagonism, Iran's posture was remarkably different. Under the rule of the Pahlavi dynasty, Iran became the second Muslim-majority nation, after Turkey, to grant de facto recognition to Israel in 1950. This was not a token gesture. It was the beginning of a deep, multifaceted strategic alliance that represented a modern renewal of the ancient Pahlavi, and Israel's leadership saw the world through a similar lens. Both were pro-Western, both were wary of Soviet influence in the region, and both faced hostility from radical pan-Arab nationalism, embodied by figures like Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser. They had a common enemy, and in the cold equations of international politics, a common enemy is the bedrock of the strongest friendship. What unfolded between the 1950s and the 1970s was nothing short of a warm alliance. Far from the public eye, this relationship blossomed in intelligence cooperation. Israel's Mossad helped train and advise the Shah's feared intelligence agency, Savak. They shared information on radical movements and regional threats. Economically, their ties were vital. Iran became Israel's primary oil supplier, defying Arab boycotts and securing the nation's energy needs. Israel provided Iran with expertise in agriculture, irrigation technology, and infrastructure development. Israeli airlines flew regular routes to Tehran, a city that was home to a prosperous Jewish community that felt secure and largely integrated. This golden era of Iran-Israel relations seems almost like a fantasy today, a parallel world. It proves that the current division is not an eternal feature of the region's history. Rather, it is the result of a singular, seismic event that changed everything. That earthquake was the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Years of popular resentment against the Shah's autocratic rule, economic inequality, and perceived subservience to American interests finally boiled over. The Shah was overthrown, and returning from exile was an austere, charismatic figure who would become the architect of a new Iran. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. Khomeini sought not just to replace a monarchy with a republic. He sought to establish a theocracy based on his radical interpretation of Shia Islam and his ideology of Velayat-e-Faqih, the guardianship of the Islamic jurist. Central to his worldview was a fierce opposition to imperialism and what he saw as its proxies in the Middle East. In his Manichaean worldview, the United States was the Great Satan, the font of global corruption and oppression, and Israel, with its close ties to the U.S., its Western-oriented populace, and its conflict with the Palestinians, was branded the Little Satan. To Khomeini and his followers, Israel's existence was an anathema. It was not merely a geopolitical adversary, it was an illegitimate entity, a Zionist base implanted in the heart of the Islamic world by colonial powers. It was seen as an affront to Islam, particularly because of its control over Jerusalem, home to the third holiest site in Islam, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Palestinian cause became a central pillar of the new Islamic Republic's foreign policy, not just out of solidarity, but as a tool to position Iran as the true leader and defender of the Muslim world, in contrast to the Sunni Arab regimes that were seen as corrupt and compromised. The revolution didn't just change Iran's government, it re-engineered its very soul and its perception of its place in the world. The old friendship with Israel was not just terminated, it was violently repudiated as a sin of the Shah's era. One of the new regime's first acts was to sever all diplomatic ties, expel the Israeli representatives, and hand the keys to the Israeli embassy in Tehran over to Yasser Arafat and the Palestine Liberation Organization. The promise of Cyrus had been replaced by the fatwa of Khomeini. In the decades that followed, this ideological enmity translated into a full-blown Cold War, one rarely fought by direct clashes between Iranian and Israeli armies, but rather through third parties on the battlefields of other nations. This is the era of the proxy war, a strategy perfected by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, to extend its influence and bleed its adversaries without risking a full-scale conflict. This strategy has manifested on several key fronts, creating a ring of fire around Israel. Number 1. Hezbollah in Lebanon, perhaps Iran's most successful and formidable proxy. Hezbollah, the Party of God, was born in the aftermath of Israel's 1982 invasion of Lebanon. The IRGC saw an opportunity in the chaos of southern Lebanon and the disenfranchisement of its Shia community. They provided funding, elite military training, and ideological guidance, transforming a collection of disparate militias into one of the most powerful non-state fighting forces in the world. For Iran, Hezbollah is the crown jewel of its forward defense strategy. It provides it with a direct presence on Israel's northern border, armed with an arsenal of over 100,000 rockets and missiles capable of hitting any point in Israeli territory. The 2006 conflict between Israel and Hezbollah demonstrated the group's potency and cemented its role as Iran's primary deterrent against an Israeli attack. Number 2. Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. While the relationship here is more complex due to the Sunni-Shia divide, the principle of the enemy of my enemy is my friend prevails. Iran became a crucial patron for these Palestinian militant groups, particularly in the Gaza Strip. It supplies them with funding, increasingly sophisticated weapons, and technology, such as that used to improve the range and accuracy of their rockets. By backing these groups, Iran not only strikes at Israel directly from another front, but also undermines the more moderate Palestinian Authority and gains popular support among Arab populations who feel betrayed by their own leaders. It keeps the Palestinian cause burning and exerts constant pressure on Israel's southern border. Number 3. The Syrian Front. The Syrian civil war that began in 2011 was a humanitarian tragedy, but for Iran it was a golden strategic opportunity. To save its key ally, the regime of Bashar al-Assad, Iran invested enormous resources, sending IRGC advisors and mobilizing thousands of Shia militiamen from Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. As the war stabilized in Assad's favor, it attempted to establish permanent military bases, build weapons against Israel, and transfer advanced weaponry like precision-guided missiles to Hezbollah through Syrian corridors. This set off alarm bells in Israel, which responded with a sustained air campaign of hundreds of strikes inside Syria in a war between the wars aimed at rolling back Iran's entrenchment. Number 4. The nuclear program. This is the most dangerous and existential aspect of the conflict. From Israel's perspective, the possibility of a regime that denies the Holocaust and openly calls for its destruction acquiring nuclear weapons is an intolerable threat. Israel views Iran's nuclear program not as a civilian energy project, as Tehran claims, but as a covert weapons program. This conviction has led to a multifaceted campaign of sabotage, including cyber attacks like the Stuxnet virus that damaged Iranian centrifuges, and covert operations that have resulted in the elimination of key Iranian nuclear scientists. The 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA, was seen by Israel as fatally flawed, providing Iran with a sanctioned path to the bomb once its clauses expired. The tension over the nuclear program is the flashpoint that constantly threatens to turn the shadow war into a devastating regional conflict. Thus, the promise of Cyrus, a 2,500-year legacy of coexistence and often friendship, was completely inverted by the revolution of 1979. What was once a relationship based on mutual respect and shared strategic interests has morphed into a bitter ideological duel that spans the entire Middle East. The division is not just between two governments. It has poisoned perceptions between two peoples with incredibly rich, intertwined histories. The tragedy of the relationship between Iran and Israel is a powerful reminder of how history can be hijacked, how millennia of connection can be undone by the convulsions of politics and ideology in a matter of decades. The echo of that broken promise resonates in every missile fired, every threat uttered, and every life lost in this conflict, a conflict whose end is not yet written and whose consequences continue to shape the precarious reality of our interconnected world.